Get this woman out before she steals something. She doesn't belong here. Watch her hands. They always try to grab jewelry. People like her never pay. They only come to waste our time." Those words sliced through the air of prestige luxe like a blade. Not whispered in secret, but spoken loud, proud, dripping with arrogance for everyone to hear. The staff smirked. A few customers turned their heads. And in that instant, humiliation settled on the shoulders of a 70-year-old black woman who had done nothing more than walk through the front door. Before we continue, comment where you're watching from. Hit like if this shocks you, and subscribe so you don't miss what's next. Now let's step back into that Saturday morning in September, on Madison Avenue in New York City, where one ordinary shopping trip would end 5 minutes later with the firing of an entire management team. Evelyn Carter, 70 years old, dressed simply in a navy sweater and flat shoes, entered Prestige Luxe with quiet purpose. Her life had been long, hard, and full of battles. But today her mission was tender. She wanted a dress worthy of her granddaughter's doctoral graduation from Columbia University, and she wanted a necklace to honor 50 years of marriage, half a century of loyalty to the husband she still wore a ring for. She did not come as a businesswoman or a billionaire. She came as a grandmother, as a wife, as a woman of dignity who had saved memories to celebrate. She expected to be greeted like any customer. Instead, the moment her feet touched the marble floor, she was marked, judged, and branded unworthy. Rebecca Sloan, the store manager, carried herself as if she owned the entire block. Blonde hair in sculpted waves, tailored gray suit, and the air of someone who believed Madison Avenue belonged only to her kind. She looked Evelyn up and down once and decided everything. To Rebecca, the simple sweater meant poverty, the dark skin meant suspicion, and the age meant weakness. She leaned toward her assistant, Jason Miller, and with a smirk said, "Keep a close eye. This one's trouble." Jason chuckled, thrilled to mimic her cruelty, whispering, "Yeah, let's make sure she doesn't walk out with anything." Hannah Brooks, the senior associate, joined in with a louder jab. "They always head straight for jewelry, thinking they can touch diamonds like they own the world." The venom dripped, and Evelyn, though calm, heard it all. She didn't flinch. She lifted her head, her eyes steady, and moved toward a rack of dresses. Her hand rested on a burgundy gown, classic cut, elegant lines, the kind of garment a grandmother would wear with pride. She lifted it gently, tested the fabric, and asked in a soft tone, "Do you have this in a size 12? The words were polite, measured, filled with the calm authority of someone who had seen the world. But Rebecca's reply came coated in disdain. "These gowns start at $3,000. Perhaps I should show you our clearance section downstairs." She stretched the word clearance as if it carried a stench. Evelyn kept her composure. "Price is not a concern. I'd like this one in my size. Please." Rebecca let out a sharp laugh. "The kind people use when they want to remind you of your place." She looked across the store, made eye contact with staff, and repeated for others to hear. "Price isn't a concern," she says, "ma'am. These dresses are $3,000, not 30. Her voice mocked, her tone cut deep, and her staff snickered like schoolchildren around her. Evelyn stayed still, her voice firm but even. "I said what I meant, please. Size 12. The staff exchanged glances, shaking heads, muttering comments under their breath. Jason whispered, "This is gonna be fun," while Hannah smirked. "She won't last 10 minutes in here." At that moment, the store stopped being a boutique and became a stage for cruelty. Evelyn moved toward the jewelry counter, her eyes catching a necklace in the display. Delicate diamonds arranged in an intricate pattern, perfect for her anniversary. She pointed and said to the cashier, "Ryan Carter. Could I see that piece in the middle, please?" Ryan didn't even move. He stared at her like she had asked to touch the crown jewels. His voice rose, dripping with disbelief. "That necklace is $18,000. He paused, letting the number hang in the air. Then added, "Are you sure you want to waste our time?" Evelyn met his gaze and nodded. "Yes, I'd like to see it." Ryan turned toward Rebecca and called out loudly, "Boss, she wants to see the $18,000 necklace." The words carried across the store. Rebecca rushed over, eyes wide with mock shock. "The Cartier piece? Ma'am, that's $18,000, not $1,800. Did you understand the price?" Evelyn's patience began to thin, but her dignity did not crack. "I understood you," she said. "Please show me the necklace." Rebecca scoffed. "With all due respect, you might feel more comfortable at the department stores down the street. They have nice costume jewelry, probably more in your price range." The insult hit like a slap, but the real slap was still to come. Evelyn reached for her phone, her instinct sharpened by decades of experience. Calmly, she said, "I will document this. I believe I'm being discriminated against." Rebecca's face turned red, her pride stung by being challenged. "You will not record in my store," she shouted, lunging forward to grab the phone. Evelyn stepped back, clutching it to her chest. "Don't touch me. I have the right to record my own interaction." Rebecca's mask fell away. Her voice rose in a scream. "You don't belong here. You're disturbing the peace. Get out before I call security." Evelyn held her ground, standing still, recording, the lens capturing every sneer. And then, with the fury of someone who could not stand being defied by the woman she had judged unworthy, Rebecca lifted her hand and struck Evelyn across the face. The sound cracked through the boutique like thunder. The slap was sharp, brutal, humiliating. The staff gasped. Then some clapped, as if a victory had been won. Customers pulled out their phones, some in horror, some in excitement. Tyler Hayes, the young security guard, rushed in, handcuffs already in his grip. "Turn around, ma'am. You're under arrest for causing a disturbance." Evelyn's cheek burned red, her hand still clutching the phone that had captured it all. She had come to buy a dress and a necklace. But in that moment, she was treated like a criminal. The staff laughed, high-fived each other, mocking her pain. Rebecca's lips curled into a smirk of triumph. But what none of them knew was that the woman they had just humiliated was not only innocent, she was the very person who held their futures in her hands. And within 5 minutes, those hands would wipe every one of their names from the payroll of Prestige Luxe. The slap still rang in the air when the scene inside Prestige Luxe descended into something close to theater. But a theater of cruelty, not art, not culture, not fashion, only humiliation. And Evelyn Carter, 70 years old, stood there with a burning cheek, her hand trembling slightly, not from weakness, but from disbelief that in the year 2025, in the middle of Madison Avenue, she had been struck for daring to want to buy a dress and a necklace. The staff, instead of being shocked, treated it like entertainment. Jason Miller, the assistant manager, grinned wide, slapping his palm against Hannah Brooks's hand in a celebratory high five, whispering loudly enough for others to hear. "This is how you deal with people like her." Hannah laughed, tilting her head back, adding, "I knew she'd crack. They always do. Now let's see her escorted out like the thief she is." Ryan Carter, the cashier, was already pulling his phone out, opening a camera app, and muttering, "I'm posting this on my story. The internet's gonna love it. An old woman trying to play rich and getting what she deserves." Tyler Hayes, the security guard, had both hands ready on the cuffs, his voice rehearsed, steady, the tone of someone who had done this many times before, saying, "Ma'am, turn around right now, hands behind your back. Don't make this harder than it needs to be." He had arrested countless customers of color in his career, most on the flimsiest suspicion. And this was just another moment to him, another badge of pride, another notch on his belt of so-called order. Rebecca Sloan, the store manager, was flushed with victory, her palm still tingling from the force of the slap, her eyes glowing with a kind of twisted satisfaction as she declared, "You are trespassing. You are disturbing my customers, and you are assaultive. We don't tolerate this in my store. Not today. Not ever." She pointed her finger at Evelyn like a prosecutor before a jury, and her staff nodded, clapping, even laughing as if this were a game. Customers in the store were divided, some horrified, whispering under their breath that this was going too far, while others took out their phones, eager to film, eager to share, eager to capture what they thought was a crazy customer being put in her place. And Evelyn, though shaken, remained upright, her voice trembling but still clear, saying, "I have done nothing wrong. I came here to shop, and you will regret what you've just done." Yet her words were drowned out by the chorus of jeers and the clinking of metal as the cuffs came closer to her wrists. Jason leaned in and sneered, "Lady, you should have stayed in your lane. This is Madison Avenue, not some discount mall." Hannah added fuel. "Next time, maybe remember your place before you walk into a store like this." Ryan laughed. She thought she could buy an $18,000 necklace. Can you imagine? Maybe if she saves for 10 years, she could afford a button. Rebecca, feeling emboldened, spoke louder for all to hear. "You see, this is why we have to guard our doors, because people like this think they can walk into luxury spaces. But we know better, don't we? Team?" And the staff clapped like a chorus line, backing up their lead. Evelyn clutched her phone closer to her chest, the red mark on her cheek stinging, but her pride intact, whispering under her breath, "Lord, give me strength." Tyler's hand gripped her arm roughly, yanking it back, and the metallic snap of the cuffs opening echoed like a warning bell. Customers gasped, some finally realizing this wasn't just a rude exchange. This was an elderly woman about to be handcuffed for the crime of existing. One young shopper muttered, "This doesn't feel right," but said nothing more, fear keeping her quiet. Another filmed silently, shaking her head, knowing this footage could explode online. Evelyn's mind raced. She had expected prejudice. She had tested for it before in other stores, but she had not expected this level of open hostility, this public theater of racism, this joy in tearing her down. Yet she knew something no one else in that room fully understood. She knew that her silence now would only make the justice louder later. Tyler twisted her wrist, preparing to lock the cuff, when Rebecca shouted with almost gleeful rage, "Yes, do it! Cuff her! Let her rot in a cell! Let her know this is not her world!" Hannah and Jason laughed together. "Bye-bye, Grandma! Enjoy jail!" And Ryan lifted his phone higher, recording the entire arrest as if it were a comedy skit. The atmosphere was madness, cruelty dressed as professionalism, discrimination packaged as customer service. And still Evelyn stood, refusing to cry, refusing to beg, her voice calm but resolute as she said, "You are all making the biggest mistake of your lives." At that very second, across the street, Victoria Daniels, the regional director, was running, her heels pounding against the pavement, her phone buzzing in her hand as security footage streamed live into her screen. She had seen everything, the slap, the laughter, the attempt to cuff. She knew the woman being treated like a criminal was the sole owner of Prestige Luxe, the very billionaire who had bought the chain in secret 8 months earlier, the very woman who signed her checks, and she knew that if she did not get inside in seconds, everything the company had built would be reduced to ashes by a scandal so explosive it would rock the industry. Back inside. The cuffs were inches from Evelyn's wrist, Rebecca's voice triumphant, the staff giddy with self-congratulation. When Evelyn lifted her head one final time, her eyes sharp as steel, and declared, "I will not break, and you will not win." No one listened. No one cared. They were too busy celebrating their cruelty, too blind to realize that the ground beneath them was about to collapse. And in less than 5 minutes, their careers, their reputations, and their entire futures would be wiped out with the stroke of a pen and the sound of a single woman's voice bursting through the front door. The cuffs were almost on her wrists when suddenly the glass doors of Prestige Luxe burst open with a crash that silenced the entire store. And in stormed Victoria Daniels, the regional director, her face pale with fury, her hair undone from running, her voice rising with a command that shook the marble walls. "Stop right now! What have you done?" The sound froze Tyler Hayes mid-motion, his hand still holding the cuffs inches from Evelyn Carter's skin, his mouth falling open in confusion, while Rebecca Sloan blinked in disbelief. Startled not by guilt, but by the interruption of what she thought was her moment of triumph. Victoria stood in the doorway, chest heaving, her suit wrinkled, her heels scuffed, looking less like an executive and more like a soldier who had just run through a battlefield. And in many ways, that's exactly what this was, a battlefield of dignity and humiliation. Her eyes swept the scene with horror, Evelyn's cheek still red from the slap, Tyler gripping her arm, Jason and Hannah laughing, Ryan holding his phone, Rebecca flushed with arrogance. "Do you even realize who this woman is?" Victoria shouted, her voice trembling with rage. "Do you comprehend what you've just done?" Rebecca stepped forward, stammering. "We were handling a difficult customer. She was disruptive. She was recording. She was." But her excuses died under the weight of Victoria's glare. "Difficult customer," Victoria repeated, her voice cutting like a blade. "That is what you call this. Humiliating a 70-year-old woman, slapping her across the face, mocking her, trying to have her arrested in her own store." The words hit like thunder, and the staff shifted uneasily, their smirks fading into nervous frowns. Evelyn stood still, dignified, her eyes fixed on Victoria, not needing to say a word, because she knew the reveal was coming, the moment she had prepared for when she bought this company in secret. Victoria straightened her shoulders, her voice dropping into a deadly calm, the kind of calm that precedes a hurricane. "This is Evelyn Carter," she declared. "She doesn't just shop here, she doesn't just visit here, she owns here, she owns this store, this chain, every location, every paycheck you've ever cashed, every piece of merchandise you've ever touched belongs to her." The silence that followed was so heavy, it felt like the air had been sucked from the room. You could hear the faint hum of the lights, the buzz of a phone vibration in someone's pocket, even the shallow breaths of customers who had been watching in shock. And then the terror began to spread across the faces of the guilty. Rebecca's skin drained of color, her mouth opening and closing without words, her eyes flicking to Evelyn as recognition dawned. The same Evelyn Carter whose face had been on the cover of Fortune, whose name had been tied to the sale of a fashion empire for $3.8 billion just a few years earlier. Jason's smirk vanished, replaced by a twitching panic, sweat dripping down his forehead as he whispered, "Oh my God!" Hannah's hands shook so badly she dropped the scarf she had been folding, her mascara running as she muttered, "No, this can't be real." Ryan fumbled with his phone, desperately trying to delete the video he had been recording. But it was too late. Already uploaded to his cloud. Already permanent evidence of his glee in a crime. Tyler loosened his grip, stepping back as though the cuffs in his hands had turned to fire. "I didn't know," he muttered, his voice thin. But Evelyn finally spoke, her voice steady and low. "You knew enough to judge me the second I walked in." The customers, who had moments before been passive observers, now gasped and whispered, some raising their phones to capture the unfolding reckoning, realizing they were witnessing history, Not just a shopping dispute, but the exposure of systemic cruelty inside a luxury chain. Rebecca collapsed against the jewelry counter, her legs giving way, whispering, "I didn't know. I didn't know." As if ignorance could erase the slap, the insult, the order to arrest. Victoria, refusing to show pity, pulled out her tablet, her fingers flying across the screen, her voice sharp. "Termination documents are ready. Legal is already on the line. The board has convened an emergency session. Every second of this footage is preserved, and within hours, the world will know what happened here." Jason began to sob, dropping to his knees, pleading. "Please, Mrs. Carter, I was just following orders. It wasn't me, it was Rebecca." But Evelyn's gaze was cold, her words firm. "Following racist orders makes you just as guilty as giving them." Hannah stumbled forward, mascara streaking, saying, "I didn't mean the words. I was just trying to fit in." But Evelyn shook her head. "You meant them enough to say them out loud. You meant them enough to laugh at my pain." Ryan muttered excuses about being young, about making a mistake, about posting for clout. But Victoria cut him off. "Save it for the investigators. They'll be interested in your jokes." Tyler, still holding the cuffs, whispered, "I thought I was doing my job." And Evelyn answered with a sharp truth. "Your job is to protect, not persecute." The store felt like a courtroom, the walls themselves echoing judgment, every eye on Evelyn, every guilty heart pounding, customers recorded. Some crying at the sight of an old woman who had endured humiliation only to rise in power. Others shaking their heads at the sheer audacity of the staff. Rebecca tried to stand, but her knees buckled, and she fell again, gasping for air, the weight of her career collapsing on top of her. Victoria leaned down and said quietly, "You've ended yourself, Rebecca. No one else did this but you." At that moment, Evelyn raised her hand, not to strike, not to scold, but to command silence. Her voice was calm, almost gentle, but carried the weight of an empire. "For 5 minutes you believed I was powerless. For 5 minutes you thought you could humiliate me because of the way I look, the way I dress, the color of my skin. But in these same 5 minutes, you've destroyed your own futures, and now justice begins." The words sent chills through everyone present. Outside, the sound of sirens approached, not to arrest Evelyn but to escort out those who had shamed her. Reporters were already on their way, tipped off by social media posts spreading like wildfire, and standing in the center of it all, Evelyn Carter, with the red handprint still glowing on her cheek, looked not like a victim, but like a judge preparing to pass sentence, while the staff who had mocked her now trembled in the knowledge that they had mocked the very woman who owned them all. The silence in Prestige Luxe shattered when Evelyn Carter turned her eyes toward each guilty face and began delivering judgment with the calm certainty of a woman who had survived decades of prejudice and risen to power anyway, her words landing heavier than any slap could. "Rebecca Sloan," she said, her voice steady yet cutting. "You struck me, you humiliated me, and you tried to have me arrested in a store I own, a store that exists because of the empire I built, and for that you are finished." Rebecca shook her head violently, her hands trembling, her voice breaking as she tried to speak. "Please, Mrs. Carter, I lost my temper. It was the stress. It was a mistake. I can apologize publicly. I can fix this." But Evelyn's calm voice sliced through the air. "You cannot fix the stain of hatred. You cannot undo the sight of you slapping a 70-year-old woman because of her skin. And the law will not treat this as a mistake. It will treat it as assault." Rebecca collapsed to the floor again, her mascara running, her cries echoing off the marble walls. But no sympathy came, not from customers, not from staff, not from the woman she had dared to strike. Evelyn's gaze moved to Jason Miller, who was still kneeling, sobbing, his hands clasped as if in prayer, his voice desperate. "I was only following orders. I never wanted to hurt anyone. I only laughed because she told me to. I only blocked you because I thought I had to." And Evelyn's reply was sharp. "When you follow cruelty, you are cruel. When you laugh at racism, you become racist. When you choose silence in the face of wrong, you are guilty. You are terminated immediately, and every luxury retailer will know why." Jason bent forward until his forehead touched the cold marble, his sobs mixing with the whispers of customers recording every second. Evelyn turned to Hannah Brooks, who stood frozen, her body rigid, her face streaked with black rivers of ruined makeup. "You, Hannah," Evelyn said. "You accused me of theft without cause. You mocked me in front of strangers. You made entertainment out of my pain, and you poisoned this store with your words." Hannah clasped her hands, shaking. "It was the culture. Everyone talks that way. I thought it was part of the job. I never truly meant harm." But Evelyn's voice was like steel. "The culture of hate ends here, and you end with it, because the moment you chose to use your voice to spread poison, you sealed your own fate. You are fired, and your name will live online forever, not as a professional but as a warning." Hannah's knees buckled, and she slid down against a display case, her chest heaving as the reality set in that her career was not just over, it was branded. Then Evelyn's eyes shifted to Ryan Carter, who stood clutching his phone, sweating as though holding a weapon that had already turned against him. "Ryan," she said, "you refused me service. You mocked my ability to pay. You laughed at my request to see jewelry in my own store. And worst of all, you recorded my humiliation with glee." Ryan stuttered. "I was young. I didn't think. I was just making content. I swear I didn't mean for it to go this far." And Evelyn's tone grew colder. "Content built on hate is still hate. Content built on humiliation is still cruelty. And your content will follow you into every job interview, every background check, every attempt to start over, because the internet never forgets, and neither will I. You are terminated immediately, and your future will answer to this moment." Ryan's face drained of blood, his knees trembling as he muttered, "It was just a joke." But the words rang hollow, bouncing uselessly around a store filled with judgment. Finally, Evelyn faced Tyler Hayes, the guard whose cuffs had nearly closed around her wrists. "Tyler," she said, her voice sharp enough to cut stone, "you were ready to cage me. You were eager to arrest me, not because I broke the law, but because a white manager pointed at me and told you to, and you have made a career of targeting customers who look like me." Tyler swallowed hard, his lips dry, his voice barely audible. "I thought I was doing my duty. I thought keeping order meant obeying the manager." And Evelyn stepped closer, her eyes piercing his. "True duty is to justice, not to prejudice, and you failed both. You are fired, and your license to work security will be revoked, because what you almost did here today would have been one of the greatest mistakes in retail history, and you cannot be trusted to wear a badge again." Tyler dropped the cuffs, the clang of metal against marble echoing like a funeral bell for his career, his head bowing low as the weight of disgrace consumed him. Evelyn then turned to Victoria Daniels, her trusted director, and gave a slight nod, a signal that it was time to move beyond the store. Victoria lifted her tablet, her voice loud and clear for every customer and employee present. "Effective immediately. 5 staff members are terminated. Their names reported to corporate, to legal, to law enforcement where crimes apply, and security will escort them out now." Gasps rippled through the store as the terminated employees cried, begged, and pleaded, some grabbing at Evelyn's hands, others screaming their innocence, but their voices were drowned by the truth, the videos, the witnesses, and the red handprint still burning across Evelyn's cheek. Customers watched in stunned silence as additional corporate security officers entered, collected the guilty one by one, and led them out, their cries echoing through the boutique. Rebecca wailing about her mortgage, Jason babbling about his pregnant girlfriend, Hannah sobbing about rent, Ryan trembling about loans, Tyler whispering about his family. But none of it mattered, because their victims had been countless, their cruelty consistent, and their excuses hollow. Evelyn raised her phone once more, recording their exit, and said calmly, "This is accountability, this is justice, and this is only the beginning." Outside, news cameras were already assembling, tipped off by the viral clips customers had uploaded minutes earlier. Inside, the marble floor that had been a stage for cruelty was now a courtroom of consequence. The staff who had celebrated humiliation only minutes before were now reduced to tears and shame. Their laughter turned into sobs, their confidence shattered, and Evelyn Carter, standing tall in her simple sweater, looked not like a grandmother shopping, but like a titan of justice, the very owner of the empire they had thought they controlled. And with each word she spoke, she not only erased their careers, but rewrote the story of what luxury would mean from this day forward. The marble floor was barely dry from the tears of the fired staff when Evelyn Carter lifted her chin and made a simple call that would ripple across the corporate world. Her voice calm, measured, and unstoppable. "Victoria, connect the board, now." Victoria Daniels, already anticipating this moment, tapped her tablet, and within seconds, screens lit up with the faces of board members from New York, Los Angeles, Chicago, Miami. Executives in suits interrupted mid-meeting, mid-flight, mid-life, their expressions shifting from annoyance at the emergency to shock as the camera panned to Evelyn, her cheeks still glowing with the red mark of assault. "Madam Carter," one whispered, realizing instantly what the scene meant, and Evelyn nodded, her tone carrying both gravity and fire. "Yes, you see me. You see what has been done in my store, to me, by employees wearing our logo, by managers trusted with our brand, by people who believed cruelty was culture. And today we draw the line." Gasps spread across the digital room, and one board member stuttered. "Was there an incident? Should we handle this privately?" But Evelyn's eyes hardened. "There will be no covering, no spin, no soft handling. This is not a PR inconvenience. This is a cancer in our company, and I will cut it out, root and stem. Today," she ordered all security footage preserved. Every racist remark, every mocking laugh, every second of humiliation, and she demanded immediate legal escalation. "File with the Department of Justice," she said firmly. "Alert the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission. Call the FBI Civil Rights Division. Let there be no doubt we do not hide. We confront. We reform." The board members nodded, some pale, some trembling, as they realized their billionaire owner was not only furious, but determined to turn this catastrophe into a revolution. Within minutes, corporate lawyers were on the line. Voices urgent, outlining liabilities, lawsuits, damages. But Evelyn silenced them with a single sentence. "The greatest liability is silence. The greatest risk is inaction." She announced mass terminations across the chain. Not 5 people in one store, but 53 employees at 15 locations nationwide, all documented over the past 8 months of her undercover inspections. "We are not firing scapegoats," she declared. "We are purging a culture." Her words reverberated not just through the board, but through the customers still standing in the store, phones in hand, streaming live to millions. Outside, reporters were assembling, police cars flashing lights not to arrest Evelyn but to escort the guilty away. Social media was already ablaze, hashtags multiplying by the second, hashtag justice at prestige, hashtag Evelyn Carter, hashtag true luxury, millions of views in minutes, a tidal wave that no PR spin could ever control. And Evelyn leaned into it, speaking directly into the cameras, her voice slow, deliberate, heavy with the cadence of history. Luxury is not defined by who you exclude, but by how you serve. And starting today, prestige luxe will become the standard of dignity in this industry. Her statement became a soundbite replayed across every news channel by nightfall. Meanwhile, the fired staff were being processed, escorted out past flashing cameras, their faces caught in every grimace, every tear, every pathetic plea. Rebecca Sloan covered her face, screaming at the cameras to leave her alone. Jason Miller sobbed about his unborn child. Hannah Brooks begged for forgiveness. Ryan Carter cursed the media. Tyler Hayes kept muttering that he thought he was following orders. But none of it mattered, because the world had already judged them, and their names were now permanently tied to the ugliest scandal luxury retail had ever seen. Inside the board call, one nervous executive whispered, "Stock will collapse by morning." But Evelyn shook her head. "Let it collapse. We will rebuild stronger, cleaner, more just, and investors will follow integrity." She announced a new fund, $100 million dedicated to anti-bias training, community scholarships, and industry reform. A bold signal that this was not about damage control, but transformation. The lawyers balked at the cost, but Evelyn raised a hand. "The cost of racism is greater. The cost of silence is endless, and I will not pay it with my soul." Her words hushed the room. Victoria then projected live feeds from other locations where simultaneous terminations were unfolding. Managers stunned as pink slips arrived. Staff escorted out. Customers cheering as abusers were removed. The scope of the purge was unprecedented, the largest single-day termination for discrimination in retail history. And Evelyn did not flinch. She detailed case after case. A black teenager followed for an hour in Atlanta. A Latino family told the store was closing in Chicago. An Asian grandmother accused of theft in Phoenix. A Native American father refused service in Miami. Each documented, each punished, each proof that the cancer had spread and was now being excised. By the time she finished, the board sat in silence, not daring to object, only nodding as she concluded. "This company will either stand for justice or it will not stand at all. And as long as I own it, justice is the foundation." The cameras inside the store captured every word, customers clapping, some in tears, whispering that they had never seen power used like this, not to protect wealth but to protect dignity. Outside, the news vans had multiplied, anchors reporting live about a 70-year-old black billionaire who had just turned her humiliation into a revolution. Evelyn Carter stood in the center of her store, not in designer gowns or glittering jewels, but in a navy sweater and flat shoes. Yet she was the most regal figure on Madison Avenue that day. And as she ended the board call with a single command, "Implement everything immediately," the weight of her authority settled over an entire industry. That evening, as the sun set behind the skyline, every major news outlet led with the story. Stock tickers rolled red with temporary drops. Social media pulsed with outrage and admiration, and customers lined up outside Prestige Luxe not to shop, but to show solidarity, chanting her name, holding signs that read, "True luxury is dignity." Evelyn did not smile. She did not gloat. She simply stood at the door of her store, greeting each supporter with quiet gratitude, her cheek still bruised but her spirit unbroken, knowing that the storm had only begun, but also knowing she had already turned its winds toward justice. The days that followed were nothing short of a corporate earthquake, and Evelyn Carter stood at the epicenter, unshaken, while everything around her trembled, because once the footage of her slap, her humiliation, and her revelation hit the airwaves, it spread like wildfire across every screen in America. Late-night hosts replayed the moment of Rebecca Sloan's hand striking her face. Morning anchors debated what it meant for race and class in America. Social media stitched together every cruel comment from Jason, Hannah, Ryan, and Tyler, turning them into viral villains, and hashtags surged to the top of every platform. Hashtag justice at prestige, hashtag Carter reckoning, hashtag true luxury. Millions of posts condemning the behavior, millions more praising Evelyn's strength, and as the outrage built, the markets shook. Shares of Prestige Luxe's parent holding company tumbled 12% in a single trading session, wiping out hundreds of millions in value. Analysts declared it the steepest fall in luxury retail since the financial crisis. And yet Evelyn was unflinching. She released a statement that read simply, "Integrity before profit. Always." And though investors panicked at first, by week's end, some began to call her bold response a masterstroke, the kind of decisive action that restores faith in leadership. The lawsuits began immediately. Class actions filed by customers who had been profiled at other stores, civil complaints lodged by advocacy groups, inquiries opened by the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission and the Department of Justice, and headlines screamed of the largest federal investigation into discrimination in retail history. With Prestige Luxe as the reluctant case study, Evelyn faced the storm directly, appearing at press conferences, her navy sweater replaced with a simple black dress, her voice steady as she said, "I will testify before Congress if necessary. I will hand over every file. I will cooperate fully, because sunlight is the best disinfectant." Her words echoed through halls of power, lawmakers praising her transparency, activists rallying behind her, even rival brands forced to scramble to announce their own reviews and reforms. Terrified of being the next Prestige Luxe, the personal consequences for the fired employees were immediate and brutal. Rebecca Sloan was charged with misdemeanor assault, her mugshot plastered across tabloids, her once bright career in luxury retail finished forever, her friends abandoning her, her name now synonymous with hate. Jason Miller's pleas about his pregnant girlfriend fell on deaf ears as he was blacklisted from the industry. His LinkedIn account flooded with comments calling him a coward. Hannah Brooks faced online ridicule so severe she shut down all social media, her landlord threatening eviction as she missed payments. Ryan Carter became a meme, his smirking face captioned with the words, "Content never forgets." And Tyler Hayes lost his security license, sued by civil rights attorneys for unlawful detainment, his name appearing in case law as an example of profiling gone wrong. Meanwhile, Evelyn expanded her reforms beyond the walls of her company. She launched the Carter Initiative, a $100 million fund dedicated to scholarships for minority students in business, partnerships with historically black colleges and universities, mentorship programs in underserved communities, and mandatory intensive anti-bias training for every Prestige Luxe employee worldwide. Not just a one-hour module, but a week-long immersion led by experts, actors, and psychologists, designed to break down unconscious prejudice, role-play difficult interactions, and rebuild empathy. She ordered AI monitoring systems installed in every store, tracking interactions for patterns of profiling, with automatic alerts sent to compliance teams, and she set up a zero-tolerance hotline where customers could report discrimination directly to corporate, bypassing managers who might bury complaints. And she made one promise that shook the industry. Any employee found guilty of discrimination will not just be fired, they will be banned permanently from my companies, their names added to an industry-wide registry we are creating with other luxury retailers, because racism should not recycle into another job. These changes were bold, costly, controversial, yet they drew admiration from unexpected quarters. Civil rights leaders called her a pioneer. Business schools cited her crisis management as historic, and even Wall Street analysts grudgingly admitted that after the initial drop, the company's long-term value might rise, because customers trust brands that take accountability within 3 months. Sales at Prestige Luxe rebounded sharply, lines forming outside stores not just for the merchandise but for the message. Customers from diverse backgrounds finally feeling welcome, influencers praising the transformation, and one viral video showing a Latina mother and her teenage daughter being warmly greeted in a Los Angeles store captured hearts, captioned simply, "This is what luxury should feel like." Evelyn's face became iconic, not as a victim, but as a warrior for dignity. Her red cheek memorialized in murals, editorials, even a Time magazine cover titled, "The Woman Who Changed Luxury." Meanwhile, the fired employees drifted into obscurity, some attempting lawsuits that went nowhere, others giving bitter interviews that only deepened public contempt. Rebecca spotted in a discount store line, Jason working odd jobs, Hannah moving back home, Ryan hiding from cameras, Tyler vanishing entirely, each reminder that actions have consequences and cruelty leaves scars that opportunity cannot heal. Prestige Luxe's competitors quietly copied Evelyn's reforms, launching their own training and hotlines, and industry conferences buzzed with one phrase: the Carter Standard, shorthand for zero tolerance, transparency, and accountability. And though many grumbled about the cost, none could deny the power of Evelyn's stand. In interviews, she remained humble, always returning to the same line: "I did not fight for profit. I fought for dignity, because dignity is the only true luxury." And as the lawsuits advanced, as the investigations dug deeper, as Congress called hearings, Evelyn sat ready, unafraid, her files open, her records clear, knowing that history was on her side. 7 months later, the memory of that day on Madison Avenue had not faded. If anything, it had grown larger, becoming legend. And Evelyn Carter, now 71, stood at a podium in Washington, D.C., her once bruised cheek now a symbol of resilience, her voice broadcast live to millions as she addressed a congressional hearing on corporate accountability. And she began with the same dignity that had carried her through the storm. "I was humiliated. Yes, but humiliation can be fuel. Pain can be purpose. And I vowed never to let what happened to me happen to another." Lawmakers leaned in, reporters scribbled, cameras rolled, and Evelyn laid out the transformation Prestige Luxe had undergone. The $100 million Carter Initiative funding scholarships, the AI monitoring system now exposing bias in real time, the hotline fielding hundreds of calls, the mass training programs changing hearts and minds, and she declared, "We cannot legislate morality, but we can enforce accountability. We can refuse to let cruelty hide behind uniforms, name tags, or titles." The applause that followed was rare for a hearing room. But Evelyn was no ordinary witness. She was living proof of what leadership looked like when wealth was wielded not for exclusion, but for change. Across America, her reforms had rippled outward. Luxury retailers from New York to Beverly Hills adopting similar measures, smaller boutiques scrambling to update policies, and even industries outside fashion, banks, hotels, airlines, inviting Evelyn to consult on building cultures of dignity, her influence expanding far beyond Madison Avenue. The fired employees, by contrast, lived in the shadows of their decisions. Rebecca Sloan tried to mount a comeback by opening an online boutique, but every Google search of her name brought up the slap and the word racist, killing her chances. Jason Miller's child was born, but he struggled to provide, working delivery jobs, haunted by the video of him mocking Evelyn. Hannah Brooks attempted to sue for wrongful termination, but her case collapsed when security footage replayed her words. Ryan Carter vanished from social media, yet his smirk lived forever in memes. And Tyler Hayes took a construction job far from New York, bitter, forgotten, still insisting he had just followed orders. Their downfall served as cautionary tales in every business seminar discussing the case. Their names examples of how a single day of cruelty can erase an entire career. Meanwhile, Prestige Luxe flourished, Revenues not only recovered but rose 15% year over year, driven by communities that had once avoided luxury spaces now walking through the doors proudly, knowing they would be treated as valued customers, not suspects. And the company's culture transformed. Sales associates of every race and background thriving, managers promoted for empathy and excellence, not arrogance, and customers posting heartfelt testimonials online. From a black grandmother in Atlanta who said she was treated like a queen while shopping for her granddaughter's prom dress, to a Latino father in Miami who bought his wife jewelry for their anniversary without judgment, to an Asian American college student in Chicago who cried as she was offered genuine assistance instead of suspicion. The message was clear. Evelyn had not just changed a company, she had changed lives. At the congressional hearing, she closed her testimony with words that would be quoted for years. True luxury is not leather or diamonds. True luxury is dignity. And when we strip people of dignity, we strip ourselves of humanity. The room erupted in applause, and the image of her standing tall, pearls glinting under the lights, was splashed across front pages the next morning with headlines like, "The Carter Standard Becomes Law," because Congress, spurred by her testimony, began drafting new regulations requiring stricter anti-discrimination policies in retail, a legislative legacy she had never planned but fully embraced. Months later, Evelyn returned quietly to Madison Avenue, not in front of cameras, not with fanfare, but alone, walking into the very store where she had been slapped, now completely transformed. And she smiled softly as Carmen Rodriguez, the new manager, greeted her warmly. "Welcome back, Mrs. Carter. We are honored to have you." Evelyn walked slowly through the aisles, watching staff assist customers of all backgrounds with genuine warmth, hearing laughter that was kind, not cruel, and she felt a peace she had not known on that terrible day. She paused at the jewelry counter, the same place she had once been mocked for asking to see a necklace, and this time a young associate, Maria Santos, presented her with a velvet box without hesitation, saying proudly, "Would you like to try it on?" Evelyn's eyes misted as she touched the diamonds, not for their brilliance, but for what they represented: change, justice, dignity reclaimed. Outside the store, people still whispered her name, still pointed with admiration, still thanked her for her courage. And Evelyn, though humbled, knew this was never about her alone. It was about every person who had been told they didn't belong, every customer humiliated for how they looked, every worker pressured into cruelty to fit a toxic culture. And she knew the fight was far from over. But she also knew she had left an unshakable mark. That evening, in her townhouse, surrounded by her children and grandchildren, Evelyn told them softly, "Never let anyone tell you your worth is defined by what you wear, what you own, or what they see. Your worth is in your dignity, and no one can take that unless you give it." Her granddaughter, the very one whose graduation had inspired her shopping trip, hugged her tightly, whispering, "Grandma, you changed the world." And Evelyn smiled, not with pride, but with quiet gratitude, because she knew that one act of injustice, turned into a stand for justice, can ripple across generations, across industries, across hearts. The slap that was meant to humiliate her had become the spark that redefined an empire. And as she looked out the window at the city lights, she whispered a prayer of thanks, knowing that her legacy was not the wealth she had built, but the humanity she had restored. Thank you for watching this story. Please subscribe, leave a like, and let me know where you're watching from.